Доброго дня.
Good afternoon, everyone. Tomorrow there will be the holiday, the anniversary of monetary reform in Ukraine, and today's round table is how the reform was implemented in 1996. I would like to say that here we have people with us who carried out this reform, who were involved in all decision-making that made possible this reform, and they will tell us about interesting facts that were not presented in the media previously. You will get interesting stories. That's why we will work in a high pace, and in 1.5 hours this event will be over, and then in the lounge zone you will be able to ask your questions. So this is the agenda for today. Here we have Viktor Yushchenko, the third president of Ukraine, ex-head of the National Bank of Ukraine, Volodymyr Matviyenko, ex-head of the National Bank of Ukraine, Yakiv Smoliy, deputy head of the National Bank of Ukraine, Yaroslav Soltis, ex-deputy head of the National Bank of Ukraine, Vira Rychakivska, ex-deputy head of the National Bank of Ukraine, Oleksandr Derkach, co-founder of the joint stock Postal pension bank Aval, Natalya Hrebenyk, ex-director of monetary policy, director of the National Bank of Ukraine, Shtefan, first director of the Banknote printing factory, National Bank of Ukraine, Anatoliy Kolesnikov, ex-director of Oschadbank, and me, Moderator, chief editor of Financial Club Information Agency, Ruslan Chornyi. So, I remember I was a student. I studied at college, and we waited for this reform. There was hyperinflation at that time, and there were a lot of banknotes. It was difficult to carry them, and that's why we hoped for that reform. And now I give the floor to Viktor Yushchenko, who is going to tell us about the implementation of this reform. So please tell us about the reform, how you implemented the reform that changed this country. Thank you very much for these kind words. I would like to express my gratitude to the wonderful people who are present here today. They were at the right time in the right place to reform the monetary and banking system. They headed National Bank and also specialized banks. These were systemic banks that supported the ideology and monetary policy and the lion's share of economic policy. And I was pleased to hear that Vladimir Pavlovich will be present here. And I hoped for the meeting with him. And also I was pleased to hear that my dear colleagues, will be present here. I gave them my word that I will be here today during this meeting. I would like to start with the fact that in 1992, I had an interview to be the head of the National Bank, starting from Leonid Makarovich till Leonid Danilovich. So the main issue at that time was monetary reform. This was the most important issue of our policy because monetary reform was really needed in 1992. People saw that there are some opportunities, that the only thing that should be implemented, that is monetary reform and everything, people believed that it will bring stability. But it was the start of the most difficult period of discussion on ideology and attempts to show to the representatives of political power that national currency won't solve the problem without other reforms that are preconditions to the monetary reform. Also, I would like to say that from the first days of working of Vladimir Pavlovich in the position of the head of the National Bank, a special plan was created on how to provide this reform. The design of banknotes and coins was established, also how and many other issues that Vladimir Pavlovich solved at that times, and also the creation of the mint. And so there was some groups of people were formed that advised to Leonid Danilovich, starting from ideology, to implement this reform. There were 80 trillion debt that we had to pay to the miners, and miners were present in Grushevsky Street, and they were there constantly in the street striking, and there was an issue to pay the debts, and these were, we believed, separate tasks. And that was one of the problems. We spent a lot of time to create ideology of reforms, and we had many contradictions in this ideology. The advisors of the president, they saw this reform as fiscal reform. In the framework of fiscal reform, there should be some denomination depending on the sums that will be exchanged, and then this reform should be immediate, as Iosif Vissarionovich Stalin did. And only 2 weeks are given to the for this reform. So there were some minor issues also, but I would like to say that the National Bank, Natalya Ivanovna remembers this. The National Bank took a very articulate position. Point 1, we should carry out reform without any confiscation. So people, professionals spoke about it, and also there was calculation of assets. There were some products in storage facilities, and if during the first day of the reform people won't trust us, the second day the level of inflation will be not less than 300%. We didn't have goods to cover this money, so it was difficult to forecast the situation. So the cash is difficult to control, and it leads to revolutions, to riots, it leads to instability. And many times we went to Bankova Street, to the government and to the president, and so the mass of money was greater than the mass of commodities. So we should have adjusted these reforms. Otherwise, we would face deep social conflict. And we searched for arguments how to convince the leadership of the state that this 80 trillion that we can find in the framework of this reform, we pay it as a price, as a price of mistrust. And people won't trust the new currency. That's why we should speak with Ukrainians fairly and openly. So we should not follow the way of confiscation, and we should, as a wise power, we should firstly announce to the nation that we will start the reform and mention the date. So you shouldn't be in the hurry, you shouldn't hurry up. We will provide the opportunity to exchange everything. So that's why this principle of declaration of this reform, that was the pivot of our concept of reform. So the money were brought to commercial banks. We cannot calc the reforms of the reforms of 1964 and 1946. So we had different situation. So our National Bank has 26 centers that can formulate, through which the bank can formulate its policy and inform commercial banks. But the funds, the money, are is in commercial banks, and we should explain to people the situation, because they deposited their money with the commercial banks, and of course there is note on confidentiality, but the situation cannot last long. That's why the principle of announcement of this reform beforehand is one of the basic principles. Because if this information was not provided previously by power, so that would be full discreditation of what we did. So there was, from one side, we understood that preparation work and some confidentiality should be, because political decision is taken by the state, not we. But we should do it beforehand without waiting when it is de jure will be announced. And also the thing that was important, and I had a discussion also in Bankova Street. The president, I mean Kuchma, he gave big trust to the National Bank in the framework of this reform and the implementation of the reform. I would say there were no parallel structure that could intervene in the concept of reform, the organization plan, or other details. And one more moment. This, so the group of advisors to the president So it was difficult to communicate with them, and there was also the term of exchange, and that was not our initiative. This was a political initiative. They wanted to carry out the reforms in 2 weeks, close the, and there would be billions of coupon currency, and this money that were not provided, this money would remain to pay, this money would go to the budget and would have been paid to the miners or to other people who had delays in their salaries. So I explained to Kuchma one of the episodes in the federal system of the United States. In before 1920s, there was a reform, and they adopted a regime for the procedure. They adopted the procedure to exchange dollars. For example, old dollars for new dollars. For example, a person found some dollars in the belongings of their great-grandfather, and they bring this money, and they say, the system says that they, the person, so, and the state always take this money and they accept this money no matter when this money was printed. So I said that the aim of the reform here is to transparently and openly exchange the money and to show that we have equal attitude. We do not know the nature of the money people owe. So a national bank should exchange all the money in openly, and if people cannot do it within 2 weeks, we will exchange it in a year or in 10 years. So people should not be in the hurry, because we represent Ukrainian state that has its obligations in this generation and further. And lastly, so maybe I will take, I would like to say that I'm thankful to Prime Minister, Mr. Marchuk, who was tolerant, and he supported the position of the National Bank, and he helped to carry out these reforms. So I had full support of the Premier, and I always liked our meetings. When I informed the government and the Premier on the stages and the stage where we are, and Evgen Kirillevich, he had a notebook and he wrote something with his pen, and so if, for example, he is asked what happened on the 27th of August 1996, he can tell you, according to his notebook, what was done. So and when I came to Leonid Danilovich, I said, Leonid Danilovich, we lose time. This information will work against us, or we should announce the date of the reform. And he asked, what do you propose? I said, I propose that Premier Minister and we will go to the media on TV and we will announce the start of the reform and the conditions and time when we are going to start, to provide full information to the nation about this event. What do you want from me? He said. A decree to carry out this reform. Okay. I will ask Pinzenik that he comes with you on Sunday to the media on TV, and he phoned Viktor Mikhailovich. I won't comment why he phoned then. I don't know. And he gave the order. I ask you, together with Viktor Andreevich, you will go on TV and you will announce the reform. Okay. So I was sitting and he was standing up, and I said, and he asked what else, and I said, you should sign the decree. And he said, okay, come on Monday, and on Sunday you should explain to people the terms of this reform and peculiarities of this reform. I phoned to Viktor Mikhailovich and said, you should influence the president, because we will go there without state decision. So we went with Viktor Mikhailovich on TV, and then on Monday there was a decree on this reform. So it wasn't easy, and you should understand why we didn't do it for 3 years, because we didn't know how to serve the deficit of the state budget, because without this information we cannot start reform. So if this deficit was up to 17%, and in this situation of disbalance it was impossible to carry out reforms. So we didn't have the exchange market, we didn't have a stock exchange market, and we didn't have the law national bank to defend ourselves against emission decisions from the side of the banks and Grushevsky. And the decision on emission, the president could take during any meeting while his meetings with different specialists. So we couldn't make hryvnia stable in this condition. That you remember the first auction on the selling of grain was by the National Bank, because there was no money, and the parliament adopted the law, and the law made the hryvnia fall, and we had debates that we need first to minimize minimize the deficit, and to cover this deficit by non-emission, and the government should go to the market. That's 3 months bond, 6 months bond, and they should borrow the money from the market and do not undermine national currency. So to organize national treasury and to create conditions to implement reform of the currency. Thank you, Viktor Andreevich. Lastly, the reform happened, and I give the floor to Mr. Matviyenko, ex-head of the National Bank of Ukraine. Please tell us about preparations to this reform and what was going on then when you was the head of the National Bank of Ukraine.
I think that the speech of Viktor Yushchenko gave us all details, the sequence and methodology of the reform, and I can't add something to this exhaustive speech. The work which the commercial banks were to do, they did it successfully. I would like to dedicate some time to the issue which you already mentioned. How it happened so that in 1991, when the Verkhovna Rada appointed me the first head of the National Bank, it was June 4th. I can't get to the room of the National Bank because for 3 months Moscow had not been issuing the order on my appointment. So even in my documents it is written that I started to work in August, but I have been working since June. The conditions preceding the reform, they formed that situation in the economy which we had before reform. It had to be reformed. The monetary system should have been reformed. I can't say what proportions. Maybe some more could be done or not, but I would like to you to pay attention to one circumstance and let some MPs excuse me, they are legislative branch and they are responsible for this reform, for its success and degree of its success. The matter is that the first year, 1991, I became the head of the National Bank, and when in Moscow there was a meeting at Gerashenko at State Bank, they were hearing my speech, and after the break, Gerashenko said, why should we continue? Matviyenko has already made the Soviet Union breaking down. They understood that Ukraine will not be a republic of the Soviet Union. If there were such leader as Putin, of course such meeting would have been impossible, but then the situation was that when those leadership of the Soviet Union, they were not able to manage to lead the country, and the people were not any longer able to be patient and to so Russia stopped issuing banknotes. We didn't have a banknote printing factory, and you know that then we issued coupons of reusable coupons. They worked till 1995. It was a problem, and it was not simple. And you know what it means, how can MPs be convinced that we need some money for establishing banknote printing facilities, having the economy which we had, where to go along the path of development to become a developed country. The first matter, we should have to carry out privatization. Our Verkhovna Rada addressed this issue as they just following the instructions from the Kremlin. They were just some papers were issued to every person, to every citizen. Ukrainian Ukrainian regime gave receipts to people, so every person, every citizen had such a receipt from the state that they are a part of denationalization, or in other words, privatization. They have some share in the property of the state. I proposed to carry out the privatization through loans. People could buy the production facilities, but unfortunately it was the other way. Everything was expropriated, and the people received received nothing. And the new businessman came that when he offered some salaries which were very low, and we still have low salaries. When prices were not under control any longer, prices shouldn't have been regulated. Pricing should have been regulated. Regulation should be based on profit. Then any entrepreneur had 30, 100, 200% of profitability. And this was the basis on which that was the cause of hyperinflation, and we still try to cope with this phenomenon with hyperinflation. Those actions, they were either copied from the Russians or the economists who were authors of the reform. Their professionalism was so low that they made this concept. We have the launch of our relations with China. Chinese entrepreneurs started to come to us. Vano, it was one Chinese, I met him and he told me, I'm not Chinese. He tried to explain me something. He was telling me that this is the price, and 20%, this is the rate of profit. If I have 21% but not 20% of profit, my company will be closed by the government. And in our country, the profit was not regulated. As concerns the economy, if a capitalist sees 100,000 profit, there will be manipulations. If 300,000 profits may be seen by some entrepreneur from capitalist country, he will do everything to get this 300,000. So our first new businessmen, they eated out those money. I told that just to demonstrate that the reform was a consequence of what was created for banks and for the country. This is the problem. This was the problem and is the problem. Yanukovych also did that. And today we can state that a long time of new money in circulation, it justified their issue. If we have now reasonable laws supporting entrepreneurs and the labor force, we would have had a good state, a well-developed state. So the problem is not in the banks. Of course, National Bank have problems. How it happened, the National Bank became a supplier of profits, so a payer of to the government. 38 billion the National Bank should give to the state. You should give loans. This is our domestic investor, the most reliable one. From here, we will have entrepreneur profits and strengthening of Ukrainian hryvnia currency. It was very interesting speech. Thank you very much. It was very interesting to hear about the events of those days. You worked in Aval Bank, Mr. Derkach. How do you feel? Maybe today, looking at those days, you can tell what could be different then, what could be done in the other way. Well, I will be talking about technical details. In 1992, 1993 and 4, I was related to those events when new banknotes were brought by railway cars to different commercial banks, and I worked in Ternopil, and I was instructed to go to the bank at night. This is nonsense for National Bank officers. It was top secret. At the railway station, a railway car arrived with coins, newly minted coins. Those stocks, they could not be kept in one storage, so we worked manually. It was an armored lorry which we used to transport those coins, unloaded those bags with coins. They were in plastic bags, and the plastic bags didn't they torn out, so we took other bags of fabric. We reloaded the coins into those green bags, and we brought them into the warehouse, grain warehouse, which didn't have proper conditions for keeping money. And next day, some people sold those coins at the market because some bags were torn out and coins spilled through those leaks. So those coins, they were really spoiled with green oxide because they were kept in that substandard conditions warehouse for a long time until the decision was issued about the reform launch. In 1994, in autumn, I moved to Kiev and started working in the commercial bank here with Mr. Derkach in one structure. We were building a commercial bank, and I knew that the reform was preparations to the reforms were ongoing. So I knew that the commercial banks will be utilized in the process of exchange, and in 1996, as a systemic post and pension bank, Aval, the National Bank entrusted us to be one of the participants of this reform, and I think that nobody will be against me, my giving the floor to Mr. Derkach. So how the carbonets were exchanged to hryvnia in 1996, the head of Aval Bank will tell you now. I will not tell you about some serious things. Yes, this is true that the commercial banks didn't know how the reform will be conducted, what would be the deadlines, what would be the procedure. They were confidential governmental issues. For the first time, I understood that the reform will take place when I saw a coin at my client in the Luhansk cartridge factory. I saw there the whole bin of coins. So I understood that we were already minting coins. Then I was instructed that on Monday the reform will be launched. The time already comes. This is so my colleagues, heads of the banks, Anatoliy Vasilyevich especially, whose bank took the main blow, but we were in the worst situation out of 5 banks because the exchange of currency, 40% of exchange fell on Oschadbank, then Ukraine Bank 20%, 19% of the exchange of currency of cash were our tasks, and we were a small bank. We were the only commercial bank among those state-owned banks. We had very many questions and problems. We had problems with coins when we started loading them. When we started transshipping them, we didn't have enough coins, so all our storages, they were intended for banknotes, and our Bravary warehouse, it was just ruined because of after we brought coins into that warehouse. You know, it can't be like that you just go to the storage of the National Bank, just take 3 bags of coins and bring them to your bank warehouse. Your clients can should receive their cash, then you bring all those cash, I mean those old money which had to be exchanged. You just brought them to the warehouses and we sorted old coupons, brought them to the Department of the National Bank, and Kiev then count them, and after that you can claim for new money. In one day we were lacking money, we didn't have new money, so all the post offices stopped working. I think that the deputy head of the Department of the National Bank, he should have been invited to the today's event, because I understand the logic. Correspondence bank account was not issued to us, and physically Medvedev decided to issue a new decision. I sent him letters requesting limit increase every hour. He is very clever and gifted and ethical man. It was the matters for 4 or 5 days. They were hard days. On my as from my own experience, it was a real test. It was a feeling of ownership that we, a new commercial bank, young bank, we coped with the task which we were entrusted with. A very interesting story. I think journalists will like this story. I don't remember, maybe Viktor Fedorovich, the deputy head, he was in charge of cash office operations in Kiev region. They did much for, they tried to do much for this event not to happen. We were a small bank and we tried to cope with our tasks. He was a deputy head, he was in charge of operations. Yaroslav Soltis, I would like to invite you to tell your history, how you saw the event those days.
I took part in the organization of the first Ukrainian commercial bank. At that time, we knew that without banking system, the state won't be. And the banking system cannot live without money. Money is the means how we can estimate everything that is material. And also, we can measure patriotism also by this. If the state cannot give money to the army, there won't be any state. And the great achievement, I remember in the Supreme Council session, there was a law on National Bank and banking activity, and National Bank became independent, and the officials cannot decide what amount of money is provided, and that's why the hryvnia, when we worked for 10 years, hryvnia was stable. Firstly, it fell a little bit from 1.7 to 2 to 5, and then for 10 years it was 5, and the money mass increased and the shadow market fell because everything was done through the banks. And we didn't manipulate with the exchange rate, and only those who buy and sell could influence the exchange rate, and the situation was normal, and all the currency exchange points worked normally, and In 2008, bad banks got credits and they changed them into dollars and brought them outside the state. The hryvnia fell first to 8, and now you can see the situation. And fortunately, now the National Bank don't provide money because you cannot plant the trees in sand, and the best banks of Ukraine should get refinancing, and there are not many of such banks. 85 banks are closed, and maybe another 10 banks will be closed. Only patriotic professionals have the opportunity to bring the state to the new level, to get rid of the problems. And if we have patriots in power and professionals, so even professionals can work against the state. There should be patriots who will devote their life, part of their life, and I devoted part of my life to the stability of hryvnia in order that hryvnia would be stable, and I was devoted and dedicated to provide stability. And now when someone says some negative things about that period and that leadership, I see that this is not patriots. These are people who search for problems. And I believe that here today in Ukraine we should have many patriots. And the word patriot, it means that this is a person who loves its nation, his relatives, friends, those people who live within this territory. And the administration that is introduced now is not to provide stability of hryvnia. 90% of hryvnias is exchanged outside the national bank, and there are some greedy people, and 50 kopecks per dollar, it is exceeds the proper level. So about the reform, we created one of the best mint in the world. We created a factory in Zhytomyr, and we also started to print banknotes. And I remember that the first hryvnias were brought from Canada. How it happened and why wasn't it printed in Ukraine? It was Savchenko who dealt with this at that time. I can answer this question, please. There is an opinion that hryvnia was printed in Canada. This is not the case. There was a problem. There were friendly relationships with Canada, and they gave the proposal. They proposed to print banknotes in Canada. But Viktor Andreevich remembered Premier, and I remember the person who headed SBU. Of course, I communicated with Prime Minister and SBU. I knew what amount of money is needed. I was at the factory in London, and it existed for 125 years, and we saw that the quality is high there, but a lot of people from Verkhovna Rada, they wanted to have hryvnia from Canada. That's why we decided that we will provide to Canada to print so the biggest security was provided to the banknotes of higher nomination. So from Canada, the banknotes of lower denomination were printed in Canada. And in different So we provided this money at the same time, and both Kravchuk, Marchuk, and me, we gathered and we tried to solve this issue. There was a situation in the Supreme Council. There are always people who defend different positions, and we have good relationship with Canada. But maybe that decision was correct, but everything was done to protect national economy and also to protect money properly. And Volodymyr, Shtefan, also present here, could you tell us this about the situation you witnessed? I came to the National Bank in spring 1992, and I headed the department concerning what the issues connected with the design and the supply of the materials and the creation of the mint. And what I can say, it was identified that will be a British firm, and in February Viktor Yushchenko headed the bank, and the work was moving fast forward, and in May we signed the contract in 1993, and on the 22nd of March 1994, less in a year, the factory started its work. That was the first line, and during the year after this, the factory worked fully and provided banknotes to the National Bank. And I remember the signing of the contract with the Ukrainian side. The head of capital construction, Saranap, and me prepared the contract. And from the side of Great Britain, there were 8 people or 10 people, and we were trying to establish stages of introduction the factory into operation. They proposed that the first stage they will provide half-prepared materials, half-prepared products, and everything that is needed for printing, and we will only print. But we understood that the next stage that we will increase capabilities, but we should have also all the necessary things for the production of banknotes. And one person said that there won't be any contract, and I will complain to the head of the National Bank. And we were concerned. John Barbish King was also. So we were afraid of losing our jobs. And my colleague said that Viktor Andreevich agreed, and the conditions are met, and the contract was signed. And many years passed, but I remember this trust of men who take such decisions. So it is inspiring, and so we had great moral satisfaction for our work. And also there was an opening of the factory. The first president of Ukraine opened the factory. It was Leonid Makarovich Kravchuk. And there was a big book for the VIP guests, and He signed there, and Viktor Andreevich came there, and he said that we should bring it to the world level. And it happened so that in 1994, we went to Azerbaijan market, and the factory was visited by late President Gaidar Aliyev, and we started to work with Azerbaijan colleagues. And 1994, this is the mint, and 1995 we opened the factory of paints, and Banknote factory was the 68th factory in the world, and it had equipment of the leading factories of the world. And in a year we opened a factory for producing paints, because we needed first of all printing, paints, and then we got our own paints, and in a year we produced Ukrainian paper for printing money. So till 1996 we had all necessary equipment and materials, everything was supplied. And also many times I was in Thomas de Leroux company, and we met with their leadership, and the head of the firm said that we work and we print coupons, and our people print it, and please carry out the reform. And they said that we are not accustomed to working 3 shifts a day. So they said we should support people, and we came there at night. People stopped equipment, and we explained to them that coupons are really important for Ukraine. So this is the main information. Thank you very much. Natalya Hrebenyk, you were involved in monetary policy of the National Bank. Could you please tell us about what happened then?
I would like to say that today we are talking about the monetary reform of 1996. The first stage, few people know, it was in 1992 on March 20th when Ukrainian carbon, when it was to be launched in circulation. There was one curious situation. We conducted settlements. Russia gave us nothing, and we understood that we should issue Ukrainian carbovanets, but how to issue such an order, what accounting system procedure should be formed. It was something very conditional, very virtual. We were just facing the challenge to issue money. The banks were waiting for cash. How can we give something which we have never had? I was asked by Vadim Petrovich where the money is. I came to him. Where is your signature? I told, I'm afraid. Why are you afraid? Vadim Petrovich asked. Where will they go? Where will this money goes? What will be after that? So it was 20.4 trillions Ukrainian carbovanets. After that, we started giving loans to our Ministry of Finance to replenish money in circulation, cash in circulation. That money. I think the Ministry of Finance will be paying this loan to the National Bank for till 2035. As for me, those people who worked with me, that case made us to look absolutely differently to the work of the National Bank, that we should control cash very thoroughly, because if central bank has relevant monetary tools in their disposals to regulate mass of banknotes in circulation, everything will be good. Mr. Yushchenko told that we didn't have a stock market, but 20 years anniversary we just celebrated this year, that the National Bank created the system, and the stock market commission, the regulator forced to launch the stock market, and through the stock market we could regulate, control the mass of money in circulation through the bank system. We told those times loan issues. It was the wrong term. How could we refinance then? Mr. Viktor Yushchenko told us about 1996. We had those days about 350 trillion Ukrainian carbonets in circulations, including 330 out of banks in cash, and the work conducted by the preparatory group along with the National Bank and the commercial banks, it provided the opportunity during first 4 days to exchange about 97% of cash which was out of banks. They were exchanged to hryvnia. So working in the National Bank, it is very interesting if you understand this work. This is like a song. And I wish our banking system and the National Bank prosperity, and to our hryvnia, our national currency, I wish to strengthen. It is hard for us to understand how you can work without computers. You told that those days there were no PCs. Well, first 10 PCs were bought in London for our banking system, and now I would like to give the floor to Anatoliy Kolesnikov. You faced the strongest challenge while exchanging the cash. Thank you. It is logical to give me the floor at the ex-head of Oschadbank, because we were the latter link in that monetary reform, in conducting it, when every citizens came to banks where our Oschadbank officers exchange those money. Later I will tell you about another component which was much harder, I think, in this reform than just mere exchange of kuponokarbovanets for hryvnias. What funny moments we experienced. The system in the form of Oschadbank, it has about 13,000 banking institutions, and where 15,000 staff work. This was the army of bankers which no bank in our country had those days, no other bank. Everyone understood that the main task will be carried out by this bank. Those days it was titled state-owned and commercial savings bank. It was a state-owned, but it worked on commercial basis. This is a special scene, special form. What preceded the reform, Mr. Yushchenko told very vividly about the necessity, about the need to carry out the monetary reform. Like classics say, today it is early and tomorrow it would be late. One classic said so. When the decision was issued to carry out the reform in the first days of September. And nobody knew when the right time will be, when it starts precisely, which day. So we should have to transport all those huge amounts of cash to every of 13,000 institutions of our bank. Of course, people were told not to haste, not to hurry, but our people experienced previous reform, Stalin's reform headed by Pavlov. We also issued into circulation, put it into circulation купонокарбование, so our people experienced the купонокарбование reform, and we asked law enforcement offices to help us to ensure security of all those stocks of cash which we transported to 13,000 of our branches. We had 4 sleepless nights when the major amount of cash were exchanged. 50% of cash had been exchanged after 4 days, but it was not the most, the hardest work. All of you remember that every citizen of Ukraine had his money in the form of savings with the Oschadbank, and they were recorded in the savings books. So people came with their savings books, and there were some citizens who didn't have купонокарбованец, but they came with their books to change the records, to change the figures in their savings books. Well, this is just the task of banks, but all the task on the whole was completed by our Oschadbank alone. Maybe that's all which I thought to tell you today. There was also some other interesting stories. There were meetings and at the national bank institutions, and we always were told that if someone would fail during the reform, this would be Oschadbank, and I responded that Oschadbank has never failed with meeting the goals. Other banks experienced problems, but Oschadbank didn't. So I would like to express my gratitude to the staff of our Oschadbank. I remember one nuance from the 2nd to 16th of September when the cash was exchanged. You will never find this information that during these 2 weeks of the monetary reform, the number of savings savings deposits increased with the Oschadbank. There were long queues. People were told just don't stay in these queues, just put your money in the form of deposits, and after the reform we'll just change the records in your books. So it was huge trust on the part of our citizens. You just trust in your bank when you put a deposit during the monetary reform with the bank. So the question is 132 billions were put out of balance of the Oschadbank, and the question has not been addressed still. The number is now 112 billions, but this money should be paid by Russia. They were stolen by Russia from Ukrainians. So let's return to our topic.
Thank you. The main approaches were brightly described by my colleagues and Vladimir Pavlovich, Vladimir Andreevich, and for young people and for economists, these are things that should be known by people in this technical work. 2 aspects I would like to draw your attention to. There are a lot of young people, and people will watch us online. Young people who were living in times of independence, and also the 25th anniversary of our bank will be celebrated soon. So you know that the creation of the state is connected with the creation of its own currency. And you understand the situation of our state, and a lot has been done. And here people are present who made a lot of effort to carry out these reforms, and the introduction of the currency. This was first political component, organizational work involved, also production, because we were able in these conditions to create powerful production, closed cycles, starting from paper printing. Now we have one of the best leading mint of the world, and also methodological component, how to do, what to do. You know that the bank and the money is should be under control. So the rules were established. Also security concerns. The amounts of money that was brought by the railway, by cars, by different types of vehicles, it needed confidentiality and proper convoy, and in order to prevent some violations, and all security services, not only in the banking system, but also with law enforcers, work greatly. So this is one of the best examples that nothing was stolen, and in that period we didn't have any instances, any accidents, and the work that was done is really huge. Operative working groups were established in the National Bank, and we had meetings and controlled all the scope of work that was done. So at that time, we worked for 24 hours in the National Bank, and we didn't feel tired physically. It was the feeling that you are involved in building of the state. And there was such a period of time of romanticism. So people felt inspired that we have been doing it, and we had great satisfaction from our work, emotional feelings, like after revolution of dignity. So there was some rise in human spirit, the desire to create the state. Of course, I would like to tell several words about Grivna of today. Maybe everyone knows that we all have grivnas, banknotes and coins, and we should always believe in our currency. This is national currency, and when we work with money as professionals and as citizens, we should trust in our currency. We should believe that this is a symbol of our state, and I'm glad that today our grivna, I believe that this is one of the best banknotes of the world, and Lesia Ukrainka banknote won different prizes, and also our series that is done, we modernized the mint, and now we introduce the elements of security that are now stronger, and they are introduced in the production, and we believe that we can be proud of our currency. And now the new leadership of the National Bank, they need to continue the work, and this is cash circulation. We have 9 banknotes and 7 coins, and we use automats, and you know that it's difficult to work with many types of notes and coins, and if we look at the number of coins, I saw statistics. We have 278 coins per person. So maybe something is wrong in our coins kingdom. That's why there should be a new stage in our development of our state. We go into the cashless period, but of course banknotes and coins remain, and we should deal with these issues. And at the end, I would like to say that we wish our currency stability, and this is introduced in our law, and the hryvnia should be stable. It depends not only on central bank and commercial bank. It depends on economy, on development of economy. And Vladimir Pavlovich told us about the recipes that are really simple, but for us it is difficult to implement these scenarios. But I believe that we will introduce this, and I would like to wish everyone to participate in the processes. And of course, I wish you to have more stable hryvnias in our wallets. So why is the situation is like this? Because not everyone who is in the leadership, not every one of them are patriots. We should promote patriotism. So I entered National Bank, and 80% of people were brought by Vladimir Pavlovich. And starting from Natalya Ivanovna, many people, they wanted to resign, including Natalya Ivanovna. She told me that I never thought that you will allow me to stay in your team. We believe that if the head of the bank retired, so everyone who worked with him should leave. But you allowed us to remain. So Vladimir Pavlovich told us about patriotism, and I was really surprised that Vladimir Pavlovich writes verses, and I had one episode. I always went to work with Trident, and we used the Ukrainian language, and everything was done in Ukrainian, and this was not artificial. Everyone understood that it should be like this. Once, Natalya Ivanovna went in such a blouse. I signed documents, and I saw a trident on her blouse, and I saw that she wears this trident on her blouse, and I thought whether I should react on this. But I didn't know whether I should have reacted. And then 10 years passed, and during one event, I said, Natalya Ivanovna, I saw that trident on your blouse, but I didn't want to say this because maybe this wasn't ethical. And several weeks passed, and we had Ruslan Chornyi in the leadership of our bank, and he was really well-established man, Russian by origin. He never used Ukrainian language. I didn't know why. He spoke Russian. Several weeks passed. He came with Trident too. And we worked for 2 terms in the National Bank. And for 2 terms he wore Trident. So not only him, but also other people joined. So this does not relate to work directly, but I valued it high and continue to value this. Thank you. So I would like to end our press conference, and I would like to add to Ms. Rychakivska's words. I would like to remind that the National Bank also introduced memory coins and associations of those who collect these coins, they buy these coins, and people of the world are interested in our coins. So let's be proud of our grivnas. Now we go into the lounge zone where you can take the interview.
Дякую.